Welcome to Rambam on the Parashat. I pick one theme from the Torah portion and study it through the lenses of Rambam's teachings. This week, we begin the book of VaYikra with Parashat VaYikra. The book of Shemot, as I'm sure you know, told of the miraculous story of the Exodus from Egypt, the theophany at Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah, the sin of the golden calf, and Hashem's forgiveness of the Jewish people, and of course, the building of the Mishkan. Out of the 11 Parashiot in the book of Shemot, 4 of them are devoted to the details of the construction of the Mishkan and all the religious accoutrements, such as the menorah, the Mizbeach, the Shulchan, and the Aron Kodesh. The book of VaYikra is also known as Torat Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim, which deal primarily with the laws associated with the sacrificial service, what I will refer to as the Korbanot. These are the sacrifices brought and usually burnt in the Mishkan and what would later become the Bet Hamikdash. The book of VaYikra also deals with the laws of purity and impurity and matters relating to the status of the Kohen. In our shiur today, we will discuss Rambam's beautiful and inspiring worldview on animal and gift sacrifices to God that took place in the Bet Hamikdash. And we will touch upon and reflect on his inspiring views on the purpose of the Bet Hamikdash. In order to appreciate Rambam's teachings, we will compare them to the teachings of another great luminary of the Middle Ages, Ramban, Nachmanides. Both Rambam and Ramban were from Spain. Rambam was from Andalus, southern Spain, while Ramban was from northern Spain. 2 Torah giants, each presenting the Torah views and perspectives that they were heir to. One Torah, 2 very different teachings and approaches. Let us begin with Ramban, Nachmanides. The worldview that he represents and teaches is encapsulated in a few words from his commentary on VaYikra, chapter 1, Pasuk 9. I'm going to read to you from my Chumash, Torat Chaim, here. Perek Aleph, Pasuk Tet. Veiktir HaKohen et HaKol HaMizbecha Ola Ishereach Nichoach Ladonai. And the Kohen shall burn the entire animal on the Mizbeach, and it will be an appealing fragrance for God. On this Pasuk, Ramban says as follows: Vehinei bakatuv hazeh tam hakorbanot. On this verse, says Ramban, is the entire reason for the korbanot. Shehem ishereach nichoach ladonai. That they are a wonderful, pleasant fragrance for God. After this, Ramban goes into an entire long diatribe against Maimonides, the position of which you don't know yet. And then, in the middle of this long essay, he says, Ve'al derech ha'emet, yesh bekorbanot sod ne'elam. Ve'al derech ha'emet, says Ramban, by way of the truth. He means the Kabbalistic meaning of the korbanot. There is a hidden secret, a profound sod, sod ne'elam. For Ramban, as gleaned from his many writings, the korbanot in the Bet Hamikdash, each of its details has cosmological effects on the world and on Hashem. God desires the sacrifices and finds pleasure in them. On the verse in Sefer Shmot, again, I read from my Chumash. Ramban says as follows. I read from Perek Chavtet, Pasuk Memvav. Ve'yadu ki ani Adonai Elohehem, asher hotzeiti otam me'eretz Mitzrayim. And the Jewish people will know that I am the Lord their God, who has taken them out of the land of Egypt. Lishochni betocham, in order to dwell among them. Ani Adonai Elohehem, I am the Lord their God. Ramban initially quotes Rashi, Al menat lishkon betocham. Rashi says, in order that I dwell among them. Ramban doesn't like Rashi's commentary. He feels it's not strong enough. Then he continues, Aval Rabbi Avraham, referring to Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra, Amar, Ki lo hotzeiti otam me'eretz Mitzrayim rak ba'avur ki eshkon betocham. Ibn Ezra says, the entire purpose of taking them out of the land of Egypt was so that I dwell among them. V'zehu ta'avdun et ha'elohim al har hazeh. And that's what the verse means when it says that they will leave Egypt in order to serve God on this mountain. Ve'yafeh piresh. For Ramban, this is the correct pishat. Ve'im kein yesh be'inyan sod gadol. Ramban continues, there's a great secret here in Ibn Ezra's comment. Ki kefi pashut hadavar hashchina be'Yisrael tzorech edyot ve'lo tzorech gavoa. Ramban here says, many people think, according to the simple understanding, that the whole purpose of the Shekhinah is for the people, for the human beings. But indeed, Ramban says, the opposite is true. Avahu ke'inyan shamara katuv Israel asher bach et pa'er. The opposite is true. The purpose of the Bet Hamikdash and the Korbanot is not for the people, but rather, Ramban says, for God. God desires to live in the physical world. But the only place God can live is among the Jewish people. And that is why God took the Jewish people out of Egypt. And that is precisely why the Jewish people built the Mishkan and the Bet Hamikdash. This is Nachmanides' truth, the great secret he alludes to in the beginning of the book of VaYikra. Rambam, Maimonides, presents for us a completely different approach to Korbanot and to the Bet Hamikdash. And I will argue that Rambam's approach here is a window into his overall approach to Judaism and to a life of Torah and mitzvot. As I said earlier, two great luminaries with two very different approaches. In his own words, let me read to you what Rambam says about sacrifices. It is so beautiful, so courageous, and so inspiring. I will only read just a few short passages from an otherwise relatively long chapter in the Moreh Nevuchim, Rambam's Guide to the Perplexed. Chapter 32 in section 3. Rambam introduces his insight by gently preparing us for what he himself expresses might be jarring to the soul. He points out how everything God created builds on itself. In other words, things start out modestly and slowly, change and grow at a reasonable pace. Change cannot happen suddenly. A baby that just comes out of the womb can't start eating a hamburger. It starts out nursing from the mother's breast, wet and gentle, then progresses to soft food, and slowly then harder food, and the body learns to eat whole and nutritious foods. This explains, Rambam, is why God had to take the Jewish people through the desert out of Egypt, and not, as the verse says, V'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz Pilishtim, the route of the Philistines, which would have been much shorter and direct. God was concerned that the Philistines would go to war, and the Jewish people were not prepared for war. So the question is, why doesn't God just make the Jewish people great warriors? God turned the Nile into blood. Why not make the Jews superheroes? The answer is, God does not change people's nature. The people must change themselves. That is why there is such a thing as reward and punishment. The Jewish people that left Egypt were slaves. They had slave mentality. They weren't prepared to war. If for a people to be prepared for war, they have to prepare themselves. And so God took the longer route. And that is why the Jewish people had to spend so much time in the desert, preparing themselves to be an autonomous, independent nation. God's law, Rambam tells us, works in exactly the same way. Let me read to you from the Moreh. I'm going to read a short passage of something that is significantly more elaborate. The Rambam says as follows, and I read from my Guide of the Perplexed, translated by Shlomo Pines, and page 526. For a sudden transition from one opposite to another is impossible, says Rambam, and therefore man, according to his nature, is not capable of abandoning suddenly all to which he was accustomed. As therefore God sent Moses, our master, to make out of us a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Through the knowledge of him, may he be exalted. At that time, the way of life generally accepted and customary in the whole world and the universal service upon which we were brought up consisted of offering various species of living beings in the temples in which images were set up, in worshiping the latter, and burning incense before them. The pious ones and the ascetics being at that time, as we have explained, the people who were devoted to the service of the temples consecrated to the stars. His wisdom, may he be exalted, and his gracious ruse, which is manifest in regard to all his creatures, did not require that he give us a law prescribing the rejection, abandonment, and abolition of such a law, considering the nature of man, which always likes that to which it is accustomed. At that time, this would have been similar to the appearance of a prophet in these times who, calling upon the people to worship God, would say, God has given you a law forbidding you to pray to him, to fast, to call upon him for help in misfortune. Your worship should consist solely in meditation without any works at all. Therefore, he, Hashem, may he be exalted, suffered the above mentioned kinds of worship to remain, but transferred them from created or imaginary and unreal things to his own name. May he be exalted. So beautiful. Rambam here explains that the ideal form of spiritual expression is of course not sacrifice of animals or bringing gifts to God. God has no need for dead animals sacrificed on the altar. The prophets have said this over and over again in the Tanakh. The reason why Korbanot played such an amplified role in the early history of the Jewish people is because They had to be weaned away from this kind of practice that was so prevalent at the time. Idol worshippers not only sacrificed animals, they also sacrificed human beings. The Torah says only kosher animals. Instead of sacrificing all over the place, the Torah says only in Jerusalem. Instead of sacrificing to all their gods, the Torah says only to Hashem, and only through the guidance of the Kohanim and Leviim, whose entire purpose was to educate the Jewish people. One more short quote, though I hope you will go back and read the entire text yourself. Through this divine ruse, it came about that the memory of idolatry was effaced, and that the grandest and true foundation of our belief, namely the existence and oneness of Hashem, was firmly established. Rambam in this chapter brilliantly reads the development of the Jewish people's theological education very carefully. Initially, Hashem's covenant with Avraham Avinu involved the Torah's ultimate goal, the affirmation of the existence of God, Hashem's unity, and incorporeality. Hashem fulfills his promise to the Avot by sending Moshe Rabbeinu to redeem them from the bondage of Egypt. At Marah, God commanded the observance of Shabbat, the stoppage of work, in order to embrace and reflect upon the ultimate goals of the Torah, the affirmation of the existence of God, creator of heaven and earth, Hashem's unity and incorporeality. Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments, was the introduction of the civil and ethical laws for creating a society that will be a mamlechet kohanim and a goy kadosh, a nation of priests and a holy people. Or lagoim, a light unto the nations. But the Jewish people sinned. The sin of the golden calf. They could not get the idol worship out of their system. The minute Moshe Rabbeinu is gone, they revert to what they know and how the rest of humanity worships their gods, with vulgar idols and sacrifices. In order to wean the Jewish people away from this primitive and violent form of worship. Idolatry, my friends, is a violent form of worship. Not for now, but trust me when I tell you, the history of polytheism and idolatry is riddled with violence. So for Rambam, Maimonides, this is what the Bet Hamikdash is about. Its very purpose is for us to bring korbanot and learn that there is only one God, incorporeal, personal, and loving, and wean us away from the prickly, tangled knots of superstitions, magic, corporeality, and multiplicity of gods. Let me read to you from the beginning of Hilchot Beit HaBechira, where Rambam devotes chapters and chapters on the construction of the Beit HaMikdash and the various laws associated with all the korbanot. Rambam says, Mitzvat aseh la'asot bait la'Hashem. It is a positive commandment to build a home for God, Muchan liyot makrivim bo korbanot. For the very purpose, and possibly the only purpose, to bring there the sacrifices. Ramban, Nachmanides, sees the Beit HaMikdash as a place for God to come down to us, a place that God needs. Rambam, Maimonides, on the other hand, sees the Beit HaMikdash as a place that elevates us to come to God. It is the place that teaches us to strive, to raise ourselves in the direction of God and godliness. For Rambam, this is the purpose of the Torah, to better oneself, to better society, and to better the world. I close with two questions on Rambam. If what Rambam is saying is true, why does the Torah spend more than a third of its book on Korbanot and the Mishkan? And the answer is because that is precisely the purpose of Torah, to teach and to educate us, to transform the world, to know Hashem Hu Ha-Elohim. Question number 2. If Rambam believed what he himself said in the Moreh Nevuchim, why does he spend so much ink detailing all the laws of the Mishkan, Mikdash, and Korbanot in his Mishneh Torah, his code of Jewish law? The answer here is a window into Rambam's true greatness. Jewish law is law, and once it is in place, only a Sanhedrin, a Supreme Court of Israel, can alter the law. Even if a halacha may seem outdated or irrelevant, we are all obligated to observe it because it is the word of Hashem. Thank you for your attention. I'll see you next week, Parashat Tzav. Take care. Bye-bye.